Hello and welcome to BadgerPod Gamer Gate number 11, Sad Pound Puppies. We have several authors who have taken part of the the Badger... Sorry guys, it's going to be one of those days.
You had one job, Allison.
I had actually multiple jobs, but anyway, Sad Puppies. Several authors who have taken part in the Sad Puppies initiative. Why don't we go ahead and just introduce who we have on our panel today, starting with Brad Durgeson, simply because you are the most of the authors. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Brad, and why you took part in Sad Puppies and so forth.
Okay, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
Yep.
I'm Brad Torgerson, published for the last 5 years in places like Analog Magazine, Orson Scott Card's Intergalactic Medicine Show magazine. I'm also an author with Baen Books, and I've been nominated for, in the past, the Nebula, the Hugo, and the Campbell Award. I've won the Writers of the Future Award, and I do mostly hard science fiction. Why am I in the Sad Puppies? Well, I'd have to say the biggest reason is because I have felt for many years like the focus, and this includes the accolades of the field, have tended to go towards things that aren't necessarily popular out in the big wide world. And the deeper I got into this field as a published author, the more disturbed I was by the fact that there was a huge gulf between what they were saying was worthy or important versus what people were actually enjoying. And I was talking to way too many fans who kept saying the same thing over and over. They kept saying, you know, I used to read science fiction and fantasy, but I've kind of dropped away from it because I got tired of what I was reading. It wasn't like what I used to like. And I think the Hugo Awards especially tend to be a bit broken because so often the Hugos go to books and stories that, you know, from a taste standpoint, or at least from a literary academic standpoint, are perfectly good. But, you know, stuff that is rousing, adventure-based, God help you if you're actually popular and you sell a lot, you know, that's almost a sign that, ooh, we're not going to give this story or this book an award because it obviously is popular, and we don't want popular. We want things that are important. And so, you know, we talk about geek conversations. It's definitely the geekiest of the geek conversations, but I feel like it's one worth having, even if it means there's drama and controversy, and I'm certainly happy to talk about it.
Well, it's great, and we're great to have you on this stream talking about it. So I'm just going to move along for time's sake. Let's go to Mike Williamson. Mike, tell us a bit about yourself and why you got involved in Sad Puppies.
Well, for background, I'm British by birth, grew up there and in Canada, moved to the U.S., enlisted in the Air Force before I became a citizen, served in active duty Air Force, Army Guard, Army Guard again, Air Guard again. Never could make up my mind. I started getting published on some technical essays and political stuff in the late 90s. Sold my first novel in 2002. Most of my stuff's with Baen, but I've done contemporary fiction for HarperCollins. I was nominated for the Compton Crook Award, the Prometheus Award. Actually, I was finalist for both, but didn't win. And now Hugo. It's hilarious because I get called every name in the book pretty much every week. People will call me a liberal, they'll call me a right-winger, they'll call me a homophobe, they'll call me a gay apologist. I have a take no prisoners political attitude about humor, and there's always somebody's oxes being gored, and you know that makes me the worst person in the world. But it wasn't until I got slated as a Hugo finalist that I found out what a horrible, racist person I am who probably waterboards puppies.
So let's go to Sarah Hoyt. I'm probably mispronouncing your last name, Hoyt. Hoyt?
No, it's perfectly normal. It's Hoyt. It's my husband's name.
Okay.
I discovered through all this that I'm a straight white male, which was a bit of a shock. I haven't had the courage to tell my husband he's gay yet. But I thought I was female and born and raised in Portugal. And I came here 30 years ago. It seems like yesterday. And I've written 23 novels for 3 different publishing houses in science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and historical fiction. Right now I work only for Bayan and Indie because it's not worth the stress. I've also been published by Analog and Asimov's and most of the magazines in the field and a bunch of anthologies. As for Sad Puppies, I'm in it because I agree with the guys. In fact, being older, I think I identified the problem before anyone but Mike, because Mike is suspicious. But, and I've never called Mike anything except mad, and he calls himself that. Also, please don't blend kitties, because my cat's giving me a really odd look.
We don't actually we don't actually do kitten smoothies.
I know.
It's just what we get tarred with a similar brush as I guess gender apostates, you might say.
Yes.
We look at men's vulnerabilities and how women actually aren't victims of every single thing. So we tend to get hit with a lot of different slurs. So we just make fun of them a little bit.
I sometimes sub for Instapundit, and as you know, he makes puppy smoothies, so that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so why don't we get a little bit of a history of Sad Puppies? And I know we got some from John Wright last week, but let's reorientate the audience again to what this is about. Does anybody, Brad, would you like to take that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
In brief, Sad Puppies began as a tongue-in-cheek joke that Larry Correia was doing 2 years ago. And the basis of the joke was every time a tedious, message-driven, literary niche story about depression and ennui and, basically anytime you had a story like that winning an award, it made puppies sad. And so please do your part to fight puppy sadness. It was basically Larry kind of poking a thumb. Now, Larry prides himself, he calls himself, a pulp writer. He's proud of the fact that he writes rip-roaring, a very action-oriented fiction, and he's very, very popular and has done very well with it. And he makes no bones about the fact that he's tired of the snobs who look down their noses at him. So that's kind of how Sad Puppies started. Last year, though, we got more ambitious with it. We decided, okay, well, we're getting some attention with this thing. Let's actually try to make an impact. And so the idea was, let's actually do a formal slate. We're not going to do some little sneaky, quiet thing like everybody else has been doing in the Hugo Awards forever and ever. And also at the Nebulas, same thing. It's all sneaky, backdoor, behind the curtain. We thought, nope, we're going to be transparent. We're going to do it out in the open. So that's exactly what we did. And it was a limited slate. There was only a few people to participate. I chose to put myself on there just because I'd been on the Hugo ballot before. I didn't want people to think that, oh, well, this is just Larry doing it for himself or his own ego. I thought, no, let's try and put some people who have been on there before so that we can kind of say, hey, this is work that's already kind of proven, or at least the authors who are participating. Not everybody is just trying, hey, I want a Hugo nomination because I've never gotten one. And so we actually thought, well, let's go ahead and go with that. Then we had more success than I think anybody expected. We really didn't think we would get most of the names that were on the limited slate onto the final ballot, which of course got us a tremendous amount of attention at that point. And then earlier this year, we kind of had a little in-group discussion. Should we continue with it, or have we proven all the points that are worth proving? And this is, Mike was involved in that, and so was Sarah and myself and Larry and a few others. And ultimately, the group decision was, yeah, let's go for it. But the question arose, who's going to front it? Since Larry had carried it 2 years in a row, I said, you know what, even though it's going to get me some grief, I think I can do that. So I volunteered to take it for this year. But one thing I wanted to do different with it specifically was I wanted to make the slate even broader. And I really wanted to try to put some works and some authors on there and some editors who I felt had been done wrong in the past. People who were very, very good at what they did and had been, doing a lot of good work for a long time, but just always fell into the blind spots. And I also wanted to try to put some new authors on there, who I felt were perfectly deserving but might struggle otherwise to find the necessary recognition, and so on and so forth. Again, all with an eye towards doing things and doing people that I thought would be less literary/academic oriented and more popular oriented, or I should say orientated maybe. And that was the basis of the Sad Puppies. And of course, everybody knows about all the giant, massive tempest in a thimble at this point. So I won't belabor all that. But really, that's the genesis of the project.
All right, Karen.
Okay, well, I was just wondering if you guys in the science fiction fantasy community are aware of what's sort of been the tempest that's brewing in the gaming community and the comic book community and all of these other forms of media that tend to be enjoyed by sort of, I guess, the nerd population. Are you guys aware of any of that? Because there's a lot of it going on.
I actually wrote about Gamergate for PJM very much as an outsider because I'm profoundly boring. I just write and read books. But I followed it with a kind of horrified, oh. And I wrote about it for PJ Media. I do this Book Plug Friday where we plug, well, the books of whoever sent them to us. And we do a little article in the beginning. And I did one called Bad Romance. Yes, and I did link Lady Gaga because the social justice warriors are bad girlfriends invading the personal space of nerds who have always, well, geeks, who have always been safe from them and demanding we change everything to be according to them. And of course, if we did, then they would leave us and go change someone else. So that's what I did. I wrote it under the title Bad Romance, but it was a very, it was a for outsiders, this is what's going on, because I'm an outsider.
Well, actually, Gamergate has been blamed for the Sad Puppies for you guys' actions. They decided to blame Gamer. I don't know did you guys know that?
No, they're seeing Gamergate under their beds.
Yeah.
I have no contact. I have some people who comment on my blog who are involved, but even they are so peripheral in Gamergate. I mean, they're gamers, but they're really peripheral. So.
Well, I remember I've been hearing lately about the slate is all right-wing conservative males, and of course, a lot of them aren't male. A lot of them aren't conservative, right-wing, whatever. A lot of them aren't heterosexual. A couple of us are immigrants, people from a variety of ethnicities. And I tell people I am a complete failure of a right-winger. I supported gays in the military in the 80s when I was active duty. I knew a young man who just enlisted, and officially I was supposed to report him since he admitted to me that he was gay. I just told him, keep your head down and don't be visible. I've supported marriage equality. I'm pro-free speech. I'm pretty much I'm agnostic. I'm pretty much the opposite of the textbook right-wing conservative.
I think the reason Gamergate got invoked, and it was to me it was a very clumsy attempt to swat all of this because on the opposite side of the aisle from where Sad Puppy sits in the literary science fiction community, and I'm assuming this is true in virtually all of the entertainment arts at this point, there are people who make a big fat deal about, well, we're the diversity people, but it's a skin deep diversity. What they're seeking really is a kind of enforced ideological monoculture with skin deep diversity. And then Sad Puppies comes along and says, we think that's crap. We don't care what people look like. We don't care what their sexuality is. We don't care about gender. We just want to try to make the awards more representative of what science fiction and fantasy actually are, to include popular authors, to include all kinds of different works and authors that might fall into the blind spots. And immediately the people who are the purists, who are like, no, we want the Hugos to be a niche thing that's very contained and properly controlled. That's the worst thing ever, so we're going to bring in and invoke Gamergate, because we know on our side of the aisle, that's how you win. Because on our side of the aisle, Gamergate is code for evil, racist, sexist, misogynist, women haters, gay haters. If there's a hater under the sun, their side thinks that's what Gamergate means. And to many people on that side, that's exactly what Gamergate means. Now, I myself, I got to admit it, I feel old. My video games are all 10 to 15 years old. I watch my daughter play the new games, and Gamergate was something that was kind of peripheral to me, that I was trying to understand for many, many months, because everybody in the freaking world had an opinion about what it was, but nobody seemed to really know. And frankly, the Sad Puppies argument has gone exactly in the same direction. I see dozens of links, or I should say I've seen dozens of links pop up because everyone's linking back to my blog, and everybody has an opinion about Sad Puppies, but nobody seems to really understand what it's about. It's just an excuse for them to spout off about their own hobby horses and their own complaints against white guys and hetero guys, and oh my gosh, the conservatives always ruin everything. Why can't we get rid of them? Blah blah blah.
What we found in Gamergate was that the people who are sort of extremely prominent in games journalism, so doing reviews and writing news on what's new in the gaming world, what's new in the industry, and the whole bit, they were all sort of these skin deep diversity players. A lot of them come from their trust fund kids. A lot of them. I mean, I think it's almost mandatory if you're going to go to school to become a journalist, that you have a trust fund, because you're not going to make a whole lot of money. And in general these days, as a young person coming up in it. And so you sort of, you look at this group of people that does want diversity on the surface, but like a strict conformity of thought. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think Steven Pinker mentioned it a little bit, and he said that this was one of the things that got him probably the greatest amount of hate mail and death threats and stuff when he wrote The Blank Slate, was the bit on art, and how there is such a thing as an inherent perception of aesthetics, and that you cannot make the ugly beautiful just by saying it's beautiful. And what a lot of you get with the sort of the really highbrow literary fiction and the depressing Sad Puppy stuff is this desire to take something really, really ugly and say that that's what real art is. Really unpleasant, dark, nasty, awful, nothing joyful about it, not even the end. It's a sad ending for everybody. There's this elitism there, and this, I think, is why they really frown on anybody who's popular. They frown on anybody who doesn't pander to that in their writing and their work. They frown on anything that's aesthetically pleasing or artistically appealing to the masses, right? So,
okay, Karen, I'm going to just step in here because let's get Brad and actually, why don't we prioritize Mike, because Mike only has a few minutes left before I believe he has to go take care of his 10-month-old daughter. So why don't we get in there and give your thoughts on that, on what that long stream of thought that Karen gave us. Thank you, Karen.
Actually, I've got to pick up my son from track practice at school because I've been the primary parent for my other kids for 17 years, because I'm so traditional that way. I keep hearing, these people want to stifle diversity. And as I keep throwing back at these people, if you look at the photos of the last several years of Hugo winners, it has the diversity of a mayo and cream cheese sandwich on white bread. You cannot possibly look at that photo and go, wow, there's diversity there. Well, they did allow a couple of Mormons in. That's their diversity. The book I've got coming out, actually, the electronic format on Thursday and print next month. There's 10 soldiers in it, and so they're very typical soldiers. There's a Filipino, there's a black guy, there's a couple of women, one of them borrowed from the Air Force. There's the Filipinos borrowed from the Navy, couple white guys, some of the religious, one's an atheist, because if you go into an Army unit, that's what it looks like. They are diverse, and you do have to get along with each other and deal with the butt hurt. But of course, I'm such a horrible, horrific right winger who can only see things white.
How many different media outlets ended up smearing you guys? As have you gotten the label hate group yet?
At least 4.
Entertainment Weekly was the fun year because of their multiple revisions. That ended up with basically one line, although they had more. But they could have summarized it in one line. The Yugos are controversial.
I think,
well done, guys.
Yeah, I think with the media, that to me that was the clown car arrival, because it was obvious that somebody inside science fiction who was so upset with us for coming to ruin the Hugos that they speed dialed their buddies and said, "Hey, we can feed you guys a line, and this will go wide, and we can trash them. We can get them now." And so suddenly, over like a 24 to 48-hour period, all these media sites pretty much parroted the same line of crap. And it was easily debunked. I mean, if the original Entertainment Weekly article if the person doing that had spent 30 seconds checking it, they would have realized it's garbage. But they didn't. They ran with it. They got egg on their faces. They totally fell for it. But that didn't really matter because, again, it's all about the narrative. It's all about spreading the narrative. They think if you can spread the narrative enough, then that will become the truth, and the actual facts don't matter.
My daughter's 17. She grew up going to conventions. Her first convention was 12 days old, my older daughter. She ran my booth at the Comic-Con here, does dozens of events a year. She knew the Hugos existed, but not precisely what they were. And that's, most people in so-called nerd culture don't know what they are. So why is this international news on major media? What is it to them? This is like some local civic award. Why is it suddenly international news?
It's because it's misogyny.
My friend Dave Freer pointed that out on our group blog, Mad Genius Club, today. He said, this involves what, less than 5,000 people? You'd have trouble making a city paper, much less international media. So yeah, someone had them on speed dial.
All right. Well, I'm going to pull Mike on here to give his some final thoughts, and because he's got to get going. So Mike, you have the floor.
Well, I'm actually glad to see that this year the slate does have diversity rather than simply a token claim of it. I mean, and the thing is with this promotion, a lot of the old timers are upset with how this promotion ruins the purity of the awards. But when the Hugo started, everyone in fandom and science fiction literature knew everybody. And if you went to the bookstore, every new title was on the shelves and you could keep up with it. These days, there's hundreds of titles a month. Brad asked if I'd like some promotion. I said, sure. Found out I got nominated, which was a huge surprise. And people actually, that was my self-pub, people had actually logged onto Amazon and bought it. I mean, my sales rank went right back up into the top 10 for political humor. So lots of people bought the book and presumably liked it. So they were actually reading and paying attention. The 2 scientific articles that are in related work are by friends of mine, and I didn't know those works existed. I just can't keep track of everything. Ted Roberts' article on how the scientific process works should be required reading, because there's so many people who've somehow gotten out of school and don't understand the difference between a hypothesis, a theory, an idea, a conclusion. And then Ken Burnside, who's part native and legally blind, he runs Ad Astra Games, did a physics article on how physics applies to space travel, which is also very relevant to sci-fi. But of course, this is all some kind of manipulation, and it's a protest rather than reality. But I would encourage anyone to look at everything that's on the ballot, try and read it. I mean, if it's not your taste, it's not your taste. But look at all the options and vote based on their merit. If you really think that nothing that's on the ballot is worthy, then don't vote for it. But I'm looking at the stuff I'm competing against, and I'm thinking that at least two of those are probably better than what I had to say, which was political snark and commentary. And I will feel no shame if any of them beat me. So,
I just wanted to point one thing out before you continue. We had John Wright on last week, and I would think that you guys, the two of you, probably have almost diametrically opposed politics, and yet you're both conservatives. And it's interesting that you took part in this. You worked together to make this happen. I just wanted to point that out. I hope I didn't step on anyone's toes with that.
I'm somewhere between.
But hold on. I didn't actually work with him. I knew that. People found him interesting. I've had maybe a dozen emails with him. I knew that people found him interesting, and then Brad says that he's been nominated too. I mean, it was like great. I haven't read it. I haven't read his work yet, so I need to go. But
okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on, and
I'll try and come back. Mm-hmm.
Great. We'd love to have you back. Certainly. You didn't get a heck of a lot of time to talk, so I would like to rectify that. And again, apologies for the technical difficulties.
Not a problem.
So thank you. And before you go, why don't you plug where we can find your work?
Well, my website is michaelzwilliamson.com. All my science fiction can be linked through baen.com, BAEN.com. Mm-hmm. You can search for me on Amazon. Most bookstores, even bookstores in New Zealand, have my stuff. I should be relatively easy to find. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of the negative fallout from what's happened, do you want to address anything in particular? Any of the articles in particular of note that you were really bothered by, or you felt were really fallacious? I know that pretty much all of them were, but throw that out to you.
I know for me, there were so many that exploded over the course of a few days that it was difficult. People kept asking me, are you going to respond to Salon? Are you going to respond to Slate? Are you going to respond to any of these things? Because they were all making more or less the same accusations and trotting out the same old hobby horses, I ended up falling back to a place where I was just like, look, I'm not going to bother trying to really defend anything here as much as I'm going to try and say, this is a bigger problem. This isn't even about the Hugos. This isn't even about literature. Gamergate, I think, isn't even about video games. It's about this politically correct culture that has risen over the last 20, 30 years. And in my opinion, it has seized the intellect of the nation. And it has invaded the arts, it's invaded business, it's invaded all kinds of different sectors. And to me, it's very anti-intellectual, it's very anti-diversity, because it promotes, again, a skin-deep diversity at the expense of actual intellectual diversity. You cannot say the wrong thing, you cannot be associated with the wrong people, for all definitions of wrong, which include whatever the politically correct people decide this week. And I just don't understand. Well, actually, I do. It's about fear, and I was going to say I don't understand why people don't speak out more, but they're afraid. They're afraid of what's going to happen to them. They're afraid of the media backlash. They're afraid their friends are going to ditch them, and so on and so forth. But sooner or later, the nut has got to crack. Sooner or later, people have got to have enough. Are we there yet? I don't know that we are. I hope we are. I keep hoping we are, but I don't know that we are.
Well, I would say that the existence of what's happening with Sad Puppies and Gamergate and some other stuff that's going on, pushback, I would say that people are at the breaking point. They're at the point where they're just tired of giving ground and giving ground and giving ground. And the people that they're giving ground to are never happy with the ground that they have. They just want more. If you allow them in, if you allow them to dictate what you're going to do and your choices and thoughts once, they just keep going and asking for more, and until there's nothing left. And so there is no win condition in appeasing them. The only win condition is to say, no, you're not going to get me to do this thing.
Yeah,
Brad is right about the fear. You watch yourself all the time. And to the extent, that I'm helping in this, and I'm, it bent my life out of shape for the last week. It's been an effort to make sure that the people who are coming science fiction and fantasy now don't have to live in fear, and that we get an actual diversity of ideas.
Yeah, which was really what the genres are about, is the diversity of ideas. I've said before on this podcast that it's with these individuals of a certain merit, it's really about being able to exclude people, not include them, and being able to exclude people by increasingly arbitrary and strict standards. But I see that Brad has sent me a message and he's got to go. So if you want to point people to where they can find your work, either your blog or your writing work, and it's been great. So I'll cede the mic to you to do that, and then I'll get Sarah to do that, and we'll say good night or afternoon.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thanks for having us on. Thanks for letting us have our say. That's more than I can say for the other side, who haven't reached out to us barely at all. Anyway, my work is available through the Baen.com website, B-A-N, that's Baen Publishing. You can also find me in the pages of Analog Magazine, Orson Scott Card's Intergalactic Medicine Show Magazine. There's various anthologies, but obviously, you can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes & Noble to pick up the work in trade paperback form.
All right, thanks, and it's been wonderful to have you guys on. I don't really think there's sides here, and I prefer to have a diversity of points of view. And it just seems like that's part of our problem, is that we can't seem to disagree anymore without throwing each other into a pit of damnation because we don't agree on everything. People come to their opinions generally, unless you have a legitimate psychological diagnosis of sociopathy, you usually have your reasons.
Yes.
And nobody gets anywhere by not hearing somebody else's opinion. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, because we can discuss, we can criticize, we can talk about our differences in opinion rationally, but you don't erase their humanity.
Because I do my work both indie, I'm bringing out a lot of the stuff that came out mainstream. I mean, in the traditional publishers, as it reverts to me, and I have a lawyer aggressively making sure it reverts. So I am at Baen, but I'm also at sarahoyt.com. Mm-hmm.
I think I have at least one of those linked in the low bar of this YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm at sarahoyt.com, which has the listings of what has come out lately, and I put stuff there when I do anything indie. And I'm also at accordingtohoyt.com. That one is because I was trying to find a blog name, and my son said according to Hoyle, and then my husband said according to Hoyt, because she likes to pontificate, as you see. So. Oh, and I will also be doing a podcast. We don't know what day of the week yet, starting probably in 2 weeks, which for Otherware Gazette, which is, I think, otherwaregazette.com. On the what I'm going to call it is the origins of our fandom, but what it's going to start with is the stuff that brought me in science fiction, and I'm going to start with Clifford C. Mack's Werewolf Principle. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that, and you guys, if you're listening, do check Sarah Hoyt out and look forward to this new podcast.
on
Thank you.
is it the origins of
How I became a fan, although I will eventually branch out to other stuff that people say that's how they became fans. So, thank you for having me on.
No, it was wonderful to have you on, and I assume that you'll also be coming back in a few weeks on this show.
I'll come back, yes.
To talk about your Sad Puppies 4 initiative.
My friend Kate Polks, Sad Puppies 4. Yes,
Yeah.
and she'll be on, and it will be a battle of the accents because she has an Australian accent.
Well, we love our accents on this show, so we have people from all over the world that sort of contribute. Mike has British, and I believe we have last show we had a drunken Scot on. That was hard, let me tell you. I think I got one word out of every 4 when he was talking. But yeah, thank you for coming on, and we look forward to having you on again.
Okay.
And yeah, have a good afternoon, and we'll move into doing some show business. After, did you have a final word? Oh, okay, she's gone. Thanks again, Sarah Hoyt, and thank you for taking part of the Sad Puppies initiative to push back against social justice warriorism in the fandoms that I love, because that was part of the reason why I sort of gave up on trying to get published. Just the knowledge that my politics are they're pretty out there. I think they're even more out there than the conservatives. So it's like, oh, good luck. If you enjoyed the contents of this podcast, please consider supporting our show. You can become our patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. This show is made possible by the contributions of listeners such as yourself. Thank you for your donation.